Today, we're going to talk a little bit about an emergency fund. I feel like everyone says there's a certain amount you should have and a certain amount you shouldn't have. And I'm just kind of going to go over what I've heard and kind of how I've taken that information and kind of made a decision for myself on how I build my personal emergency fund. So, I guess the first thing we can go over is, what is an emergency fund supposed to cover? Well, it really is just supposed to cover unexpected expenses. And I mean, there's a lot of different things that kind of fall under that. It's supposed to be in case something bad happens and you need access to cash, liquid, not anything that's tied up in like a house or in a stock or any other kind of thing that you wouldn't be able to access right away. So, an example of a few unbudgeted expenses would be maybe you have some type of car trouble, or maybe there's some type of pet emergency. Maybe your pet gets sick and you're like, oh, it's going to cost a couple $100, but it actually ends up costing a couple, like maybe $1,000, maybe a couple more $1,000. I mean, pets can get expensive, man. A few other things that they cover, or it would cover, is if you lost your job. Sometimes you can get unemployment, but unemployment is not necessarily your full wage. It's just, at least depending on where you live. I mean, it's usually just a percentage of what you make. And so your emergency fund would be able to cover that gap and help cover your regular expenses that you would have in case it happens. Also, maybe you have some type of family issue, forbid anything, maybe someone passes and you need money for any kind of services or burial, or and ideally people would have life insurance for that, but sometimes it just doesn't happen. And you need to be able to have that in case of emergency like that. Or maybe your child breaks their leg and you need extra cash that doesn't cover the rest of the medical expenses. Maybe you have one of those high deductible healthcare plans, or just any kind of family issue. Maybe someone needs cash because maybe they're having some type of issue in terms of rentals or finding a place to stay, and you want to be able to give that to them. And the other things that they would cover is injury. And I mean, I know people have health insurance, but health insurance doesn't always cover everything. Even if you have a copay, and maybe your health insurance covers most of it, there's still a little bit that you end up having to come out of pocket for. And if you have a high deductible healthcare plan, you're paying everything up until you meet your deductible, and that's crazy. Also, maybe you have some type of housing issues. Maybe something breaks in your apartment, and so you need to get a hotel for a few days because it's not really a place you can stay. Maybe you, goodness, hopefully not. Maybe you find like a family of rats, or maybe your water goes out for like a whole week and you don't have access to running water. This is kind of the area that it would, cover. Maybe you have some emergency where you have to travel and you just need that cash available to you so that you can. I mean, it really, honestly, really, it covers anything else, etc. Anything else. Really, any type of unexpected expense is what it's going to cover. So the next question is, how do you build it? I would say that's really up to you. I mean, there's a lot of different ones, a lot of different theories about how people say you should build it. But at the end of the day, no matter what anyone says, you're the one who is going to have to live with the decision you made with your emergency fund. So I think you just have to use your best judgment. But I will kind of give you a little bit of guidelines. I mean, and things that I use to kind of come to my conclusion. The first thing you need to do is prioritize. You need to prioritize what's going to be important for you to pay in case of emergency, especially if you lose your job or you get injured and you can't work. You want to prioritize what this is going to cover for you. And housing is definitely important. You want to make sure you're able to pay your mortgage or your rent or wherever you're staying so that you can keep staying there. And also your food and your household bills. It's like you don't even think about the fact that, you still got to be able to wash your clothes. You still need to eat. when I need to access that emergency fund, especially if you lose your job and especially if you're injured, and you can't go out and make some kind of income. And just other bills, you still, maybe you still, you still got to pay gas, you still got to pay electric, you still got to pay your cell phone bills so people can stay in contact with you, just considering all those other bills, maybe things that are due, that are going to be due regardless of whether or not you have a job, like your car note or, your student loan minimum payment. And I would just include any minimum payments in your other bill category. Any extra payments that you're making, I would just freeze those for now, because what's really important is for you to prioritize the top things. And the next thing is, what amount do you save? And I feel like there's just so much talk about this. Like, what amount do you save? Should it be a few $100s? Should it be a few $1,000s? You really gotta figure out what works for you. But I'm gonna give you a few things that I've heard, and a few things that I've taken what I've needed and left what I don't in terms of these. The first thing, and the really popular one, is there's a whole, the Dave Ramsey plan. Especially if you're paying off debt, the idea is to first just save $1,000 in an emergency fund and just use that for emergencies. And I think that is fine if you have minor car trouble, if you have flat tires, or if you have to travel for some reason to go see a sick relative. That $1,000 will cover those things. The next one that I've heard is you really save an entire month of your expenses. So that would go back to what we were saying before, prioritizing your housing, your food, your other bills. So some people say, you should save a whole month's worth of expenses, so that if anything happens, at least for, 30 days, you're able to cover a month of expenses, And then some people say that you should save 3 to 6 months worth of your expenses or your salary. I don't know if this is overkill or not, but I guess better safe than sorry, because I know that that's pretty, it's pretty scary. Like, especially if you lose your job, you don't know how long you're going to lose your job for. So, it's better safe than sorry to say with 3 to 6 months until you can kind of get back up on your feet. And that's really something that you're going to have to decide. You're going to decide if that's something that's okay with you, or if you can go off less. Maybe you can do 1 to 2 months of your expenses. You don't need 1 to 2 months of your entire salary. That's really going to vary person to person, but I'm just kind of showing you just the top 3 things that I've heard about and read about. So now that I've talked a little bit about an emergency fund and kind of what it's supposed to cover, and kind of what the whole popular consensus of how much it should be, how much it shouldn't be is, I think I'm going to go ahead and kind of give you an idea of what essentially my mock emergency fund would cover. And kind of for me, and I think, again, that's varies by person. So I have my monthly bills, and I have marked right here so you can kind of see. So this top number here, that's my expenses for the month. Those things are going to be due regardless of what I do, regardless of where I am. Those things are going to be due. But there's a few things here, consumables, things that are a little bit more variable, that I don't necessarily have to pay to anyone each month. But I think the thing that I would want to focus on is not only those expenses, but my actual necessary consumables. And so it's going to be, for me, gas, it's going to be food, it's going to be clothing, and that equals to about $400. So I'm going to go ahead and write here on this, and I'll zoom in for you so you can kind of see a little bit. So my mock emergency fund will cover, 1, all of my expenses. And since I just showed you for the month what my expenses look like, we know that the total of my expenses for any given month is $889.14, right? That's usually doesn't change unless I move. And the next thing that I want to make sure that it covers are my necessary consumables. And so that's going to be that $400 that we talked about that I just showed you. So 889, 14 plus 400. It's going to give us a total of 1289.14. And for me, that would be a month's worth of my expenses and my consumables that I will have to consume regardless. It's going to be my food. It's going to be gas for my car. It's going to be what little clothes I'll need to buy. I mean, especially, hopefully not, but if I didn't have a lot of clothes and I needed to buy clothes for a job interview or something like that. I mean, things like that we don't think about. And, if I don't happen to need clothes, I can use that for other things. Food, or maybe gas to a further place to commute to. So for me, I don't think that I necessarily need to have 6 months of my expenses in my salary. I think that's a nice goal for me to have. I wouldn't go with the $1,000 either, because for me, I feel like that's just too little. 1 month of expenses is really just not enough. At least I don't think it's enough. So what I would do is I would probably say I need about, we'll say 2 months of my expenses, and maybe like a little extra for whatever I want. So my goal to save would be $1289.14, because those are the ones I prioritize to pay, and not that equal sign. It's going to be times 2, because I want to do 2 months. It's going to be $2,578.28. That would be kind of like a nice emergency fund cushion for me. That's 2 months of my expenses. And maybe I say, hey, maybe, this seems okay, but maybe I feel like I need to have another couple grand in there, not necessarily to just cover my expenses, but maybe something happens where I want to be able to cover my expenses on top of those things, like my tires breaking, no, not breaking, but my tires being blown out, and maybe I need to get some special part for my car. Maybe I want to save this and additional on top of that, just to have a decent cushion in case I have to take out things. That way it gives me a bigger buffer between my expenses and those unexpected things, so that if my tires blow out and I lose my job, I can get new tires, but I can also feel safe knowing that I have a couple of months of my expenses saved up, and then if I don't get a job right away, it's fine. I can cover all those things. So what I could say that I would give myself, maybe I say I need 2 extra grand just for whatever, right? So we'll call this 2 grand of, we'll call it the emergency fund padding. And, I understand it gets to a point where like, maybe you don't need that. But if this is enough for me to sleep at night, then I think that that's fine. That's a good goal to keep. So we'll go ahead and add 2,000 to that, and so my total emergency fund, or where I would like it to stay of cash that I can access right away, is going to be $4,578.28. And that's kind of how I come to my number that I would need to have my emergency fund just like looking nice and looking great, and I don't have to worry if a lot of things bombard me at once, because I am prepared for, in case all those things happen at one time, I'll be okay. I'm going to be okay for a minute, Obviously, if it goes on like several months, which hopefully it wouldn't, it'd be fine. I think this is a nice goal for me right now. Now, in the future, I would like to save that 6 months. That would be nice. That 6 months, that'd be great. But I think right now, this is a good starting point. So yeah, I mean, I hope this video helped you. Maybe you were trying to figure out how much you should save for your emergency fund and you weren't really sure and you heard a lot of things being thrown around. So you just wanted to see how someone else kind of did the math for their emergency fund. Yeah, so that's just how I would do mine, and kind of to give myself peace of mind and also know that I'm covered if things happen back to back. Like, I'll be fine, kind of deal. But thank you so much for watching my video, and be sure to like and subscribe. And I hope you have or comment down below, like, how do you come to your conclusion about your emergency fund? Is probably, maybe it's more than this, maybe it's less than this. It'd be nice if it was, if I would get this number higher over time, obviously, but that would just be like my bare bones. Like, in case some stuff went down, I would have enough to cover a lot of things. But yeah, let me know how you come to your conclusion about your emergency fund. And thank you so much, and you have a good day.